Well, good afternoon, folks. It's 4:15 p.m. on Saturday, the 25th of May. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. So I wanted to do a postscript on last night's interview with Kat. There's some pretty fantastical things that are said there. I've met three people in the course of writing the books that were raised inside the cult. As I said, there's a fantastic YouTube site run by a woman out of Australia called Gabby Chong, Christian-centric, and she does extensive interviews with people who were raised in the cult, in various factions of the cult, and it's really quite expansive now. Okay, it's been growing and growing and growing for decades and decades now. Couple centuries, I think. It's really been taking off. Before that, it was a very tight concentric circle that was, I think, for the most part, still staying hidden. Now, when you watch an interview like that, there's a lot to take in. Cosmetically, there's an impulse to reject what the person is saying because there's a certain erraticness to their speech and their thought. It's a little bit erratic. And they're all the same way. They speak very, very fast and a million and one details, and it's almost like they're trying to get a weight off of them. This was the same thing in the other interviews I did as well. And I met all of these women through Karin Hustabot because they reach out to her. They want to get out. It's very difficult to get out once you're in. If you're born into it, it's very difficult to get out of the cult. Very, very difficult. So we're in a sense in an occult guerrilla war now. I say guerrilla because it's not organized along front lines. It's all over the place at the same time now. A bunch of plans have been set in motion to light the United States on fire, subjugate and suppress other countries like Canada and Australia and New Zealand, Britain. The replacement theory can no longer be called a conspiracy theory. It's real. These cult members don't necessarily know all the details. They're kept in the dark as much as the general public is. But the interviews with them serve the purpose of giving you a window into what they've experienced in terms of the horror of their torture and conditioning, and the first-hand witness of some of the paranormal things that go on in the cult. So when I'm doing a podcast or a radio show and I say something like, Ukraine is a blood sacrifice, and there are people equitizing the energies of those dead bodies. Equitizing. To equitize means to create equity out of something. Okay, so if you go to a mountain and you start digging for gold, then you're equitizing the mountain. Okay, you're creating capital out of it, occult capital. Now, Kat said some extraordinary things about why they kill the children, what they do with I think what is part of the energy of the body can be harvested and used. So it's necessary to speak a little bit about occult energies. Okay, so we understand physical energy. Gasoline comes from oil, diesel comes from oil, it comes from the earth. There's an entire trillion-dollar economy around oil. It runs our cars, it runs most cities in the world now. So you can understand the equitization of oil and the control and monopoly of oil. We should have been out of oil a long time ago. Now, in the Money podcast, I went back to Jekyll Island and the meeting that took place there in the early 1900s. I think it was around Christmas of 1912. Don't quote me on that, but I'm within a year or so. And I pointed out that, you know, Jekyll Island had been the site of these natives that were completely cognizant of complex Phoenician rituals and blood magic and baby sacrifice. And I do that to show you the commonality and the interconnectedness of this occult motif generation by generation. They're probably collapsing the West now because they can't impoverish the West without the West becoming aware or conscious of or involved in the destruction of the cult. Okay? They're really not that powerful. It's just a form of warfare we're not used to. We all understand bullets, we all understand bombs, we all understand missiles, we understand flamethrowers, we understand fighter jets, we understand submarines. They're visible, they're manifest, they're material. And there's nothing really to fear in occult warfare. Nothing really to fear at all. They can't harm anyone in grace. Anyone in grace is somebody under the protection of God. They cannot harm you. There's many ways to consecrate yourself with the protection of God. Any religion will do for that. Islam, Christianity, Judaism, they're all good for that. If you practice only the light side of the religion and you keep your heart open to divine love, which manifests as a connectivity to everything around you, including the plants, the animals, everything, and an intense sensitivity to true beauty, you know, classical music, paintings, beautiful architecture. And this, by the way, is why so much of our aesthetic collapsed in the West. The cult got into that as well. I don't know if Andy Warhol was a cult member. He may have just been an empath who picked up on how ugly things were and represented it in his art. Because Andy Warhol is the beginning of ugliness in art. Well, it began before that, but he was a high point for this crossroad between advertising, marketing, and art, which never should have happened. You'll notice that as you study the situation, the information you're going to get that's true is going to be very similar to my podcast and my books. It's going to be very unassuming. It's going to be a little bit like the interview with Kat. You're going to have this little voice in your head saying, well, this guy doesn't have a PhD in theology. Nobody knows this guy. Why should I believe what he's saying? And it's the goblins in your head trying to fool you. Those are the entities around you trying to fool you. Trust your heart. Your heart will tell you what's right and what's wrong. The heart is the most powerful thing in a human being. Consciousness goes far out into the multiverse, but a consciousness resting inside a body that is not centered in the heart is going to go dark at some point. You cannot be agnostic to what's going on. You can be detached, but you can't really be agnostic. And I would apply this same philosophy to a lot of the New Age teachers out there raking in big money, $1 million, $2 million, $5 million a year for stupid workshops on whatever. They're not going to help you. You're just wasting your money. They're just looting you. They're looting your fear. There's things to learn from these people, perhaps, in some instances. But all of your work and all of your benefit is going to come from your own concentration, your own commitment, and your own dedication to your own unfoldment. You are responsible for every aspect of your life, whether you realize it or not. We live in a time where you cannot extend trust to anybody. You can't allow yourself to believe anymore that the American or the Canadian or the Australian medical system is going to save you from your bad habits. Whether it's eating too much sugar or a really bad diet, processed foods, lack of exercise, lack of flexibility, tension and stress in your life all the time because you don't know where your money is going to come from to make the mounting bills in your life. It'll wear you down. It'll break you down. The whole system is designed to break you down now. This is why I got out 10 years ago. I had a divine intuition this was coming. People thought I was crazy when I did this in 2014. I'm going to Costa Rica. I'm going to build an earth bag house. I'm going to live in nature. I'm going to have a portion of my food supply around me. And I'm going to have my own water. Water is critical. Water is critical. At any point, if the cult goes any more psychotic than they are, they could go city by city and just infect the water treatment facilities. They could easily poison people. Now, they wouldn't get everybody. People would start dying and somebody would figure it out. The water supply's been poisoned. But what's your next problem after that? Where do you get water? No water, no life. You can't go very long without water. Is it really as bad as the picture I'm painting for you? Am I being dramatic? Am I being hysterical? Am I being hyperbolic for the dramatic quality of it? No. If anything, I'm understating it. It's this bad. Look at the financial situation. Listen to what the financial experts outside of the controlled system are telling you. America is a country, and in large measure Canada and Australia as well, Britain to a certain extent as well, are countries that farmed out all of their work. After we won the Cold War in the late 80s, early 90s, the Berlin Wall came down, this idea that we were all going to live some kind of magical life where we didn't have to get our hands dirty, we didn't have to do our own building, we didn't have to repair our own things, we didn't have to build our own homes, which my son built this for me based on my plan and my direction and my resources. But my son built this home for me. We worked together as a father and son. And it's going to come to that. And there couldn't be a worse time for it because the enmity between people in nuclear families has never been higher. You're literally being conditioned to hate each other or to be so self-involved you don't have time for anybody else in the formerly rich first world Western English-speaking countries. And they're all in on it. One thing Kat gave us was a tremendous sense of the scope of this. She pegs it at 200 years ago. It's very interesting. how she focused on Darwin. Now, let me just check this a second because I thought Darwin was closer to the 20th century. So, sorry, I should have had this done before I started recording, but, what are you going to do? Now I've got a slow internet with, oh, there we go. Naturalist and geologist. Oh, born February 12th, 1809, died April 19th, 1882. So he would have developed his theory of evolution. Yeah, no, she's about right. She's about right. It's very interesting to me. A lot of times I'll pick up on stuff intuitively. Like I intuitively know it was sacrilege to dissect human bodies. How did I know that? I don't know. I just knew it. I've said many times in podcasts and radio shows that Leonardo da Vinci gave us the allopathic medicine we use today. And he didn't give it to us, but he got the ball rolling. And Da Vinci would dig up freshly buried bodies in the grave. And he and his band of merry thieves would take them off to his laboratory. And he would dissect the bodies. And he was a brilliant sketch artist. And he would sketch out all of the body. And that gave us the basic understanding of the human anatomy, which prior to Darwin we did not have. When you look at the medical systems in China and India, they were holistic. They didn't invade the body, they didn't cut into the body. You've got Ayurveda coming out of the Vedic tradition. You've got traditional Chinese medicine coming out of the Taoist system. We had a natural way of healing in the West. It was European homeopathy, not so much naturopathy and homeopathy. And the shamanic traditions we had were wonderful at healing. Absolutely wonderful at healing. There were all kinds of herbs that we knew how to use. Basically, the pharmacy industry is the patenting of all the herbal knowledge that we had as cultures. So when the academics from North America went over to the rainforest in Brazil to patent a lot, to discover and then patent a lot of the processes, the compounds they found in plants, which had healing properties, the academics who would go over would be anthropologists, chemists, and biologists. And they would interact with the shaman, find out how certain things were made. Once that basic understanding was done and the notes were taken, they would take the information back to a sanitized laboratory in a first world country and continue to work on it for the benefit of the pharmacies. Pharmacia, the business of drugs. There's a very famous Canadian by the name of Wade Davis, and he was explorer in residence at National Geographic magazine for a number of years. You may know him from some of the books he wrote, one of which became a movie called The Serpent and the Rainbow, where he went as an anthropologist to Haiti, I think in the 70s. And he studied voodoo, and he wrote this book called The Serpent and the Rainbow. And the Haitian witch doctors had figured out a plant recipe to put a human being into a catatonia, okay, complete catatonia, where you're not dead, your eyes are open, but you're like a zombie. And this is where some of the voodoo priests got their reputation for being able to steal the souls of people. But really it was all chemical. They were narcotizing the people. There's a drug over here in Central and South America where If it's blown into your face and you inhale it, you are susceptible to everything you're told. If you're told to hand over your watch and the money to the person in front of you after inhaling this substance, you'll do it with a smile on your face, and then when you come back to consciousness, you won't even remember having done it. So Da Vinci started the whole thing. Now, why, if you're not a Satanist and I'm not a Satanist, why are we all affected by the Satanism? Because it's embedded into all of our core institutions now. It's embedded into the scientific process we've developed, which lacks all humanity. We rationalize everything we do now with advancement for humanity. Hey, why are you doing this to the rainforest? Because I could discover this, which could do this for humanity and cure this disease. And everybody buys that rationalization. The other big thing is the radical relationship between the subject and the object. And we don't perceive ourselves as being connected to the object anymore, whereas native peoples did. They could speak to the plants. By the way, some of the formulas for creating these remedies in the rainforest were so complex that they had difficulty replicating them in controlled laboratory conditions that could measure the substances to the microgram. And they still had trouble doing it. And yet the shaman in the jungle, just with bowls and mashing stones, could produce these substances. If you read Wade Davis's material, he says that everybody who went over there, everybody he was with in the jungle, said that these shaman were operating at a postdoctoral level in chemistry and biology. And it was all handed down generational information for the tribes. But we think they're very primitive. That's another thing that the radical subject-object relationship has done, is it has given us a tremendous superiority complex. And this rationalizes the destruction of primitive peoples who are not primitive at all. They may not know everything we know growing up in our education system, but we don't know what they know. And there should be more of a sharing, more of an understanding, more of a respect. But the satanic system that we've adopted separates us all, subject, object. And if you don't understand the object, you deconstruct it. You kill it, you take it apart, you strip it apart, you deconstruct it. That's what you do. And we've legitimized all of this. Now, you all know that one of my favorite poets is Ted Hughes. He died in the late 90s. He was the poet laureate of Britain in his time. Very fascinating guy. And he was also coming off of a base education in anthropology. He got his degree from Cambridge in anthropology. He believed that studying literature would make him too self-conscious and a less effective poet. This is one generation ago. He was a baby boomer. For me, as a Gen X, it was one generation ago. But Ted Hughes was born in the 30s, and he didn't live that long. He had 2 wives commit suicide. Let's take a look again, because I've played this before, but really listen to this. In fact, I would suggest you watch it 2 or 3 times, maybe more, to really understand what he's saying in this poem, which is from his most famous collection of poems, which is Crow, picking up on the trickster god in North American native mythologies?
Nobody was quite sure how Crow was born. Different stories were told. Out under the sun stands a body. It is growth of the solid world. It is part of the world's earthen wall. The earth's plants, such as the genitals and the flowerless navel, live in its crevices. Also, some of earth's creatures, such as the mouth. All are rooted in earth or eat earth earthy, thickening the wall. Only there is a doorway in the wall, a black doorway, the eye's pupil. Through that doorway came Crow. Flying from sun to sun, he found this home. Looking close in the evil mirror, Crow saw mistings of civilizations, towers, gardens, battles. He wiped the glass. But there came mistings of skyscrapers, webs of cities, steaming the glass. He wiped it. There came spread of swamp ferns fronded on the mistings, a trickling spider. He wiped the glass. He peered for a glimpse of the usual grinning face. But it was no good. He was breathing too heavy and too hot, and space was too cold. And here came the misty ballerinas, the burning gulfs, the hanging gardens. It was eerie. Crow looked at the world, mountainously heaped. He looked at the heavens littering away beyond every limit. He looked in front of his feet at the little stream, chugging on like an auxiliary motor, fastened to this infinite engine. He imagined the whole engineering of its assembly, repairs and maintenance, and felt helpless. He plucked grass heads and gazed into them, waiting for first instructions. He studied a stone from a stream. He found a dead mole, and slowly he took it apart, then stared at the gobbets, feeling helpless. He walked, letting the translucent, starry spaces blow in his ear cluelessly. Yet the prophecy inside him, like a grimace, was, I will measure it all and own it all, and I will be inside it as inside my own laughter, and not staring out at it through walls of my eyes' cold quarantine, from a buried cell of bloody blackness. This prophecy was inside him, like a steel spring slowly rending the vital fibers. Crow. Written.
There you go. Crow by Ted Hughes, and you can see why he's such a powerful poet. So we were talking about this path we've gone on in the West and how it is satanic. Okay? It absolutely is satanic. It can't be denied. The separation between us and everything else, the subject-object paradigm that the scientific method operates through, is satanic, because spiritually everything is connected. Okay? Now you can go through all of the individual sciences and I can explain to you how they've corrupted our perception of reality. Okay? Let's start with physics. You know, one of the big discoveries in physics is, there's many, and I'm not an expert, so one that stuck out for me was what is called spooky action at a distance. And this was, I think Einstein, or around that time, his peers discovered this. That you could affect the components of an atom here on Earth, and a similar atom at the other side of the universe would have a simultaneous reaction. Okay? So the theory of spooky action at a distance is this theory of connectivity. Okay? But if the Satanists figure this out scientifically and can apply it, the application will not be good for the human race. Okay? Not good at all, so it's not good for us. CERN is not good for us. They're literally trying to open a portal. Remember what Kat said yesterday about the portals. You know, that's one of the more fascinating things I've heard in a while. That they had all of these trapped beings that they had ritually harvested, and they had sort of trapped them the way jinn get trapped in bottles, but they had trapped them in a dimension, and they were using the energy, that spirit consciousness for magical ritual, and it was one of the bases of their power. And Kat said, which she had seen through her own third eye, that in that realm where they put the souls, a portal had opened up above it, and the souls had been taken out. So this is affirmation that something very big and spiritual is going on now. And I think a lot of these people in the cult now are quite terrified. I think they know that their end is near. And it is. It is. I wouldn't be talking about these things openly. I wouldn't be writing books like The Devil in Us if there wasn't a positivity to them. And the positivity is these things are near an end. Now, let's take psychiatry. I gave, in a previous podcast, I gave the example of the university interpretation of the ghost of Hamlet's father. That they don't accept the spiritual nature of that reading the play. It's simply a literary device. But from my understanding of Shakespeare, and I get it from Shakespeare himself, his understanding of the occult and witchcraft is on perfect display in the first act of Macbeth with the witches on the beach. Okay? So there's no doubt in my mind that Shakespeare understood these things, but in the formal academic institution, we send our children to be educated. They're separated from, oh, this is nonsense. Don't worry about that. Why is everything to do with spirituality ridiculed in this new scientific paradigm we live in? Ask yourself that. Why is it ridiculed? You know, even the bravest minds out there will not fully address it. You know, Joe Rogan will tell you that ayahuasca does something to your brain. No, Joe. You go to another dimension. There are loads of dimensions and realms out there. We live in a multiverse. Okay? And not only a multiverse, but a layered or dimensioned or frequencied reality just in our own principal universe. Okay, just on our Earth, just on this planet, there are many dimensions. There are things living at different frequency that we can't see. They could walk right through us, and we might have a feeling, a strange feeling, but we wouldn't know what it was. Take, for example, Bigfoot. Bigfoot, to my understanding, Sasquatch, can fade in and out of 3D, can go from 4D to 3D. Okay? I gave you the example of homeopathic healing, treating the body as a whole, okay, which is shamanic healing, which in many applications can seem miraculous. I've seen it work myself, okay? It's really amazing. It can affect things physically inside the body. Like, you go to the doctor on a Monday, you've got a fractured collarbone, you have a shamanic healing, you go back Wednesday, they do another x-ray, and the doctor's going, well, the machine must have been broken on Monday because it's now showing that your collarbone is not broken, and that's physically impossible. So his response to that, or her response to that as a doctor would be, the machine was broken on Monday. All around us is this incredible spiritual world, and we're being told by our institutions it doesn't exist. And you're telling me we don't live in a satanic reality? The principal goal of this cult is to collapse our consciousness so we become resource for them. And the only way we can fight back is in full consciousness. So this is the nature of occult warfare. Collapse our consciousness while they're amplifying theirs through the blackest of practices. Energy harvesting, blood harvesting, loosh harvesting. It's just endless. Okay? So the principle of this paradigm is the subject-object relationship. Okay? Now, in mechanics, it doesn't really matter. You do want to understand your car engine as an object. But when it comes to living organisms, that object expression, you know what we say, when people talk about pornography, they say it objectifies women. Well, yeah, they're right. It does objectify women, and it's wrong. Okay? But why is that principle of objectification not applied to all these other sectors that objectify things? And given that objectification has become the rational motif of our insane society, is anyone surprised that we objectify women? Women objectify themselves now. There's a lineup down the street to work for these porn companies. They're not being pimped. They're not being stolen off the street. They're lining up and doing auditions. They objectify themselves for attention, for energy, for money. Money's the root of it all. Money is just, it's vile. I mean, we need it. But there's so many ways we could work with money that would be so much better. I gave one the other day where you allow your government to print money without borrowing it from a third party like the IMF. You come up with a formula and an index, resources, commodities, productivity, and you say, okay, well, this is what the Canadian dollar is worth. This is what the Chinese yuan is worth. Okay? And then you trade with each other through the currency, but it's all within a system that is maintained by the nations and an external auditing system that keeps it honest. Okay? So if China is saying that their yuan is worth this because, they have this much rice to export this year and they've produced this many televisions and everything, you have the right to go in and audit that. Do periodic audits to make sure that they're not corrupting the international trade system. But I don't think too many countries would do it if we adopted that trade system because you wouldn't want to be blackballed. You wouldn't want to be pushed out of the circle of trade. You've heard a lot of frightening things in my podcasts and in my books, but you shouldn't be frightened. These podcasts and these books are to empower you, not to limit you, not to shroud you in a dark cloud of fear, but to tell you there's nothing to fear. You're more powerful than them in your right space and your right heart, and they know it. That's why they want to keep you off balance. That's their game. Now let me try to explain to you, again, before we get into the blood chapter, which I'm just dreading, by the way, but nonetheless. Let me explain to you what's going on spiritually. You have to assimilate all of these lessons of the fourth dimension, okay, which is the astral plane, because the human consciousness is going to a new level of expression now. And if you can't go to that level of expression, you're going to be held back. It's like being held back in high school, like losing a grade, failing a grade. You're going to be held back. Okay? And so it's very important that you apply yourself at this moment in history. And yes, it's never been more difficult. And this is why they're making it so difficult. Okay? Because they want to trap as many souls as possible. They don't want souls to get out because the soul is the energy of a realm of reality. So the more souls you have, the more energy you have in that reality. It's all an energy matrix, just like oil, but occult energy. biological, organic energy, spiritual energy. To get through this fourth dimension, which is not all bad, by the way, there's regions of the fourth dimension that most people would mistake for heaven. They're so beautiful vibrationally, the way you feel there, they're just absolutely gorgeous. It's a balanced and proportioned dimension, just like the physical world. We have positivity here and negativity here. Same thing on the fourth dimension, okay? We allowed fourth dimensional negativity to take over our systems, and Kat pegs it at the time of Darwin. Very interesting the way she did that, okay? And she says that Darwin is when they started breaking the laws of God, the universal laws, okay? That the human race, specifically the West, went against God. It was also very interesting to me how she said that a lot of the spiritual technologies of other cultures, like the Congo, like India, like South America, the shamanic practices down there, which are very powerful, and North America, okay? They harvested all of that technology. The occultists in Europe harvested all of that technology. So they looked at the Vedic system and they said, wow, there's some really good stuff here for controlling people. And that's what they did. They started working with ways to make it work for them in a control structure. Perfectly normal, I suppose, if that's what you want to do. But it's led to the position we're in now. Now, the main problem now is the interdependence. Everybody living in a first world country now, unless you're living on a farm with your own well, okay? If you're in a small town of 15, 25, or 35,000 people, you're really not that much better off than the person in downtown Detroit, or downtown New York, or downtown Toronto, or downtown Vancouver. Because all of your essential services come from a centralized source, and they have to be paid for. Can you imagine living in a world where you have to pay for water? Like, it's mind-boggling, okay? The most basic resource required by all mammals on the planet, water. We pay for it as human beings. This whole planet is like a giant fucking Airbnb. That's what they've turned it into. An Airbnb. You come here, you pay. It's not the way it's supposed to be. Not the way it's supposed to be at all. Now I need to go over the rules of combat. These are very, very important, and you need to listen very, very carefully. You can't get angry. The moment you get angry, they own you. That's their domain. Okay? You can't judge them. The moment you judge them, you're taking on their karma. At this point, they want us to judge them. I think this is why so much information about the cult is leaking out, is they want us to judge them. They need to be stopped. Okay? There's no doubt about that. They do need to be stopped. But judgment would be very, very bad for us at this point, because it would be like us taking a Trojan horse into our consciousness and our way of seeing reality. And their dark energies would invade us. This is what judgment does. You're allowed to be aware of it. You're allowed to say, like what I said on the podcast, Get Off My Planet. You're allowed to say, look, you're invading my free will space. This is ridiculous. Okay? You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to talk about it to other people like I do on my podcast, but you're not allowed to get a lynch mob together, drag them out, beat them to death, or hang them, or anything like that. Okay? A lot of the people in the cult are trapped in the cult. What choice did Kat have? Okay? So you got an explanation for how the cult got into the Belgian royal family. There was a weakness in the patriarch. He liked boys. They knew that. They leveraged it. They bred outside of his wife because she had 5 miscarriages. And then when Kat was born, she was literally taken from the hospital and put into the cult system, which is expansive, by the way. There's 3 to 5 hardcore satanic cult families in familial lines going back generations, going back to the Dutch coming over. Okay? Going back centuries. There's 3 to 5 million of them now, hardcore. If you want to know what a hardcore Satanist is, I suggest you watch a movie. Not a lot of people saw this movie. It's got to be one of the best psychological thriller, I don't want to say horror movie, but one of the best psychological thriller movies I've ever seen in my life. It's Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. Jake Gyllenhaal plays a police officer, and Hugh Jackman plays a father who has a child abducted. And it's just unbelievable. It's the perfect portrait of a hardcore Satanist. I won't tell you. You got to watch it to the end, and then you'll see what's going on. But it's that cold. It's that calculating. It's that unfeeling. The purpose of Satanism as a culture is to eviscerate, to scarify the heart. Scarify is to apply fire to. So if I have 2 acres of land behind me, and I do, and I want to plant new crops, I could go in there with a little bit of diesel fuel or a little bit of gasoline or kerosene and then burn everything that's there now, and then the ashes remineralize the earth. That's what scarification is. Okay? So the metaphor of scarifying the heart would mean to burn all the feeling in you, to burn it off. And this is what the rituals do. They burn, they as Kat said, they take your soul, or your soul leaves you. They don't get it, but the soul leaves because it doesn't want the trauma anymore. But the physical body keeps living. Okay? The soul can operate the body from a distance. It doesn't have to, in fact, in most instances, it's not actually in the body. Okay? So it can operate the body from a distance. And then once you have this evisceration of your heart, you're a useful member of the cult because you can do anything. Here come your orders. We need you to find 3 babies. Don't get caught. Here's where we recommend you steal them. Do it between 11:15 and 11:45 at night. This is when our intelligence tells us the security guard at the hospital takes a break. We'll have everything's arranged like a master crime, and boom, 3 children disappear. Now, if you have any faintness of heart, any emotional connection to what you're doing, you're not going to be able to do it. You're going to create mistakes. You're going to sabotage yourself. So Satanism is the scarification of the heart so that a human being is capable of doing anything. Anything. Picking up a baby by the feet and smashing it against rocks and killing it. Okay? Horrible to say out loud, horrible to imagine, but I'm trying to give you an example of what these people are capable of. At the higher levels, at the experimental levels and the scientific levels of Satanism, then you get into like destroying countries, destroying water supplies, earthquakes, killing millions of people. They don't blink an eye. They have no feeling. They're not limited by feeling, compassion, and connectivity. So Satanism is the ultimate disconnection from the collective experience, the intuitive, empathic, collective experience of being alive. Okay? Now, just imagine what it's like being raised by those people. Well, we got a pretty good picture yesterday, didn't we? Kat telling us one of the tortures. Boiling water, cold water. Boiling water, cold water. I want you to imagine a human being that could do that listening to the screams of a baby. That is a scarified heart. That's what we're up against. But they didn't sign up for it either. It's a miracle Kat has broken through this. It is a miracle that Kat has regained compassion, a sense of self. Okay? Very difficult life. She lives on a disability pension, and her pension is for complex PTSD. You think? Of course. But she still has heart. They didn't kill her at the heart level. That's a miracle. Okay? If you understand this culture the way I do, what she has achieved is like summiting Everest barefoot. It's almost impossible. Okay? summiting Mount Everest barefoot with no oxygen tank. If anybody ever did that, people would go, "How? That's a miracle." When you understand what these people are put through their whole lives, and that she still has feelings, she still has heart, it's a miracle. You've seen a miracle. I think that's about all for today. I wanted to do a postscript on the CAD interview and use that interview as a springboard to examine certain topics and certain realities in this culture. So, with that said, I bid you good day. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.